It's Thursday, July 30th, and we are back. We've got lots of things on the schedule to talk about. Some of these are follow-ups from things from last week. Some are pieces of somewhat breaking news. We've got a little maybe industry drama in here and also some new research.
It's always funny, like when I work right up until the moment that we hit record, instead of like spending, the usual hour that I do, well, when I can, researching things, it's always a little bit more YOLO, but that's okay. I'm prepared. Well, I'm YOLO prepared.
As prepared as we can be. Next week we are in Las Vegas. It's surreal. It's only a couple days away. I was
Right.
getting, some of my pre-packing done earlier this week, but I think it's very possible we'll skip next week's recording, but we're getting together with a whole group of security research pals. We're going to be doing a recording with our friend Mackenzie from over at Aikido. So it's possible we might not make time to do our normal live stream because it's going to be chaos, but there will be good stuff out there.
I know this is off script. I would love for us to do something.
Don't get me wrong. I'd like to do it. I'm just realistic
Yeah,
that it's going to be pure chaos.
It's true. It's very true.
So we'll see. Might be a game time decision.
Fair enough.
Okay, let's start with an update from Hugging Face. Paul, did you get a chance to take a look at the after action debrief that they published, I think yesterday?
Only very, very briefly. I glossed over it. I'm taking a look at it again here. I did notice that they mentioned that there was a second. Hugging Face didn't mention this, but OpenAI mentioned there was a second thing that got popped, company/project that compromised.
I read it was 4.
Oh, really? That's new to me.
Yeah,
That's new
I saw something. I'm subscribed to the Axios newsletter, I want to say.
Oh.
And I didn't get a chance to digest it all, but I think it's more than 2. So this model that they were training or testing rather really went off the rails.
Yeah, and to that point, like if it really is, let's just say 4, let's just pick that number. If it really is 4 companies/projects that got compromised, that starts to make this starts to tip this, at least for me, back into the, probably happened category. Because until there were additional companies that had been compromised, I was pretty skeptical. I think I made that clear last week, and there's still part of me that's very skeptical. But with more evidence comes less skepticism.
I'm going to drop the link. It was strictly VC that I got this from. So let's see here. Here's a Gizmodo article about the OpenAI part. It was 4 different victims, we'll say. So full disclosure, I haven't had time to read it yet. I did look through the Hugging Face incident report. I think it's really nicely done. This looks like it was a tremendous amount of work on their part. Yeah. They said that there were over 17,000 agent attacker actions that they had to analyze. It happened over the course of, let's see here, where's the timeline? 5 days, I believe, and they caught it partway through.
July 9 to July 13.
Yeah. So this is, again, really nice debrief or I guess analysis. They've got this really neat little timeline thing at the top of the blog that you can play with that shows you everything that happened along the 5-day attack timeline. And then they've gone in and kind of talked about the changes that they made. No surprise, the model was able to take advantage of security vulnerabilities in their configurations that were not novel things. They had something that was over permissioned. They had credentials where they shouldn't have been. They acknowledge in the report, like, look, this happened because of security hygiene issues. We fixed them. And I think I'd give them a lot of credit for making that comment. What they said is that, and I think this is from OpenAI as well, that this model that broke in, the reason that it decided to head on over to Hugging Face is it was testing this benchmark, and it went to go try to steal the answer key from Hugging Face. And there's a couple of questions with that I think are interesting questions to discuss. So one, why did it go seek out the answer key instead of just trying to solve the challenges that were put in front of it? And there's a couple of hypotheses that are out there that I think are believable. One is that some of those challenges, in fact, are not solvable. And the model in some way may have known this and said, well, I'm just going to go circumvent because I'm trying to get the highest score here. Some of the other hypotheses are around, rather than attempting to, do the challenges, that it wanted to get the best score that it could. And so instead of perhaps trying and failing, it just wanted to go get the answers. It's all kind of coming back around to the task that was put to the model was test this benchmark, get the best score you can. It heard the get the best score you can and said, oh, well, the best score will be on the answer key. So if I go steal the answer key, I can get the best score. And I think this ties back to something you and I have talked about, Paul, which is a challenge with really all models, is they're designed to do what the user asked for. And often that core, like, do what the user asked for, gets it away from what the user actually wanted it to do. In this case, OpenAI surely didn't need the answers stolen. It probably could have, may have even had access to those somewhere else. It wanted to actually test the model. But the other being, it broke numerous security policies in order to do it, managing to jailbreak itself out of the sandbox, getting into Hugging Face, doing things that I don't know that anyone's used the word illegal, but, certainly unethical, illegal behavior.
Oh, I have. I've definitely heard multiple people on Twitter and LinkedIn, basically ask, like, if a human did. In fact, I commented on one of them.
Yeah, if a human did this, what would happen? You would go
right,
to
and
jail.
that's what the person posited, right? And so my response was, what if I just tell the agent what to do and then I walk away? I'm good, right?
Yeah. So, feeling very much like I'm living in a late 90s, early 2000s apocalyptic AI movie right now.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, we know how this ends, Jen. We've all read the books. We've
seen the movie.
We've seen the freaking movies. Like, we know how this ends. Why are we just foolishly as a culture just running towards our inevitable end? Like, the
I
end
will
of
say, I live in a community that's not a strong tech community. I had lunch with a couple of friends last week. One is a hairdresser, the other is an accountant. Neither are what you would call AI experts. And they both vocalized, hey, we're trusting this less and less. We're seeing the edges. We're understanding where it works and where it doesn't. And that conversation in itself, honestly, makes me feel better about
Right.
where we're going. I don't think people are quite as blinded by the technology as they may have been 1 to 6 months ago.
Yeah, and I'm hearing kind of anecdotally the same kind of thing, both in my own network, of humans and, online in the places where I'd like to hang out. Getting back to the Hugging Face thing in particular, I got a couple questions that I need to research where this, where they say the third party launch pad was. I don't know if it doesn't look like they're specifying what
I don't think they named it. No.
Interesting. So yeah, stage 1, from OpenAI evaluation sandbox to a rooted launch pad. They talk about the first couple parts of those. And then, yeah, the part that's in orange, the rooted code avail sandbox, they don't describe that. And we have heard that JFrog's Artifactory was involved. In fact, I think that Artifactory now is one of those 4 companies that was, if I get this wrong, if I get this wrong, then next week I will mea culpa on this. But my understanding, based on some Signal conversations I'm having, is that Artifactory is one of the companies that was popped, but also that perhaps Artifactory itself was part of the escape. So if that's what they're referring to right there in that orange box, I don't know, who knows. But that aside, getting back to your point about, the LLMs making you happy, they are, forgive the Philip K. Dick reference here, but they are, LLMs and our agents are the pleasure bots of 2026. It is their job to make us happy, right? And yet at the same time, there's this weird thing where once they get themselves going down a rabbit hole and they've kind of built up momentum, they just go off the rails. And so you have this weird quantum thing where they're trying to make you happy and give you what you want as quickly as possible. But they also have pivoted down a rabbit hole they didn't need to. And now they're just, it's like, what's that called when you spend the time in it? So you're committed and you just keep going down
it's the sunk cost fallacy.
Yes, correct. Very good. That's exactly what I was thinking of. And that's what happens. I literally had this happen yesterday, where I had Claude, very specific set of skills, some modulated determinism, which is where I have like an LLM will interact with a stateful typed, library and very narrowly focused, and then pop back out to an LLM stage and so on and so forth. Hence the modulation. It's doing that, and then it just went off the rails. And I was like, I stopped it, Control C. I said, I didn't tell you to do this. Why'd you do this? And it's like, oh, you're right. I was trying to do this, but then I got too worked up in trying to figure this out. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I gave you explicit instructions and you just kind of, pivoted. And so I think both things can be true. Sorry, that was a bit of a rant there, but, they are pattern matchers and they are, trying to figure out what we want next. And so sometimes they just don't get it right.
Yeah, they get a little too excited. Okay, Paul, do you want to talk about GitHub? Yeah. Do you want to talk about GitHub now?
Oh man, I do. Which one? Do you want to talk about the malware scanning thing?
Yeah, well, let me summarize, because 2 announcements came out. I saw them yesterday, but I think they actually came out on the 28th, July 28th, right? Pretty much at the same time. So in no particular order, the first announcement is that they've made a change with GitHub Actions so that it will now hold potentially malicious workflows for approval. And then the other announcement, kind of 2 sides of the same coin, is NPM is implementing publish time malware scanning. And these are both very obviously meant to address malware in the ecosystem. The GitHub Actions change is meant to prevent account takeovers in these circumstances. And I know you're going to have a lot to say about this, where we've seen a GitHub action exploited in order to push malware into a pipeline instead of having to steal a credential. And then on the other side, we have been crying for months, perhaps years, please, NPM, please take some responsibility and proactively scan packages. So I will say, first of all, the intent here is good. Happy to see these issues being addressed. As a follow-on, the information in their announcements is very thin. The GitHub Actions workflow announcement is 4 paragraphs, but 2 of those paragraphs are like 1 line each. So very, very light on the information. Where do you want to start, Paul?
Well, let's start with the one that I have less immediate anchor about or passion about. And by the way, did I just administration stuff? Did I send you that blog post for my response to the GitHub Actions?
I feel like you were talking about it, but I don't remember seeing it. I looked for it while I was
Sorry, it got missed in that.
There will be a blog post from us analyzing this, much like what you did on NPM version 12. But
yeah,
why don't you? Go ahead.
And by the way, that blog post is one of the best things I've written. I really am pretty happy with it. Not to sound that sounds terrible.
Not to okay.
I'm very happy with it, and I'm looking forward to it. And I'll get that to you right away. But yeah, okay. So first, let's start with the actions thing. I think there's no details in this. Like this thing, like you said, I mean, this thing is tiny. This, when a workflow run is identified as potentially malicious and held, the workflow won't execute until repository collaborator with write access reviews and approves it. So that's going to just, first and foremost, that's just going to break a crap ton of GitHub Actions. And maybe it should. I'm not arguing that's necessarily a bad thing. I would suspect, because there's no details here, there's it's crazy how GitHub's, PR is getting worse and worse and worse. Makes sense though, because they keep losing people. So anyhow, I would suspect that what they're looking for is they're looking for specifically those like high risk triggers that we all kind of know, like the pwn request triggers, right? And this is like Francois and Ronnie and all those guys. This is their specialty. Adnan and all those guys. That's their specialty. But things like the pull request target, trigger, and workflow run. These are all things that run in the context of the originating repository, and that's where the problems come up. So I'm going to guess that if the execution engine sees some of those triggers in the workflow file, then it might just hold them, or might look for, might parse it to see what's happening there or what's being passed to it or something like that. But it might just be something as simple as like, we're gonna block on these triggers. Who knows? There's no details, so I'm just speculating.
Yeah, I mean, as we're speculating, what would make sense would be to block some of these things that have been exploits in the last 6-8 months. We've seen GitHub Actions abused several times. It's often, like you said, these pwn request scenarios. So stands to reason that would be on the list of things to block.
I mean, I still wonder, and I wonder this with lots of things with GitHub and NPM, but I still wonder why things like those triggers still exist, full stop. Like why does pull request target still exist? And the only reason why, let's just be very explicit, is because lots and lots of people still have it. I know, because you can just go and search GitHub and look for them. Lots and lots of people are still using it because they're too stupid and too slow to change it, to update it, right? And so because of that, GitHub doesn't want to create this massive breaking change, but they might actually be creating a breaking change here, maybe not quite as massive, in the form of these these stops, so these block actions, but we'll see. And here's the other thing, and this is going to blend into this next one I'm going to talk about. The reason that GitHub and NPM have not wanted to wade into this space is because they don't want liability. What they don't want is they don't want to not block a GitHub action workflow and then have it be malicious. And then the customers say, I thought you were blocking these. And GitHub will be like, well, we are, but it didn't look like it was malicious. And then the customer's like, well, that's because your detection is bad, or whatever. Like this is the presumed back and forth. And there's, unfortunately, there's, legally, there's like that is important, crossing that, breaking that plank is important. So, all right, now let's talk about the scanning malicious packages. In April 1st, April Fool's Day, I shiz you not, that was really hard. I shizzle you not, that April Fool's Day, GitHub came out with an announcement saying, hey, we are now scanning all NPM packages. Zach came out with it. It was legit. It was not an April Fool's joke. It was legit. Why they decided to do that in April Fool's, who knows? But, like I said about GitHub PR right now. So they have been scanning packages since at least April. And the reality is they've been doing it before that. So they, the inside baseball is that Microsoft built some scanning technology and they've been using that for months and months and months, actually over a year, I think. But then Zach mentioned that, in April that they're doing it now on all packages. Now the difference between what happened on April Fool's Day and 2 days ago is that the difference is now they're moving the scanning to before something is published. And this is a big deal. The reality is that if they can stop these packages from ever entering the ecosystem, then it's just less opportunity for these things to get pulled into artifactories and, you know, the Nexuses of the world and the Redacios of the world and all those other places where we store packages. That having been said, it is so poorly described and so lacking in technical details that it's like, it's stunning in its lack of details.
No, that's the best way to put it. I read it and it's got more detail than the GitHub Actions one, but that's a low bar.
Right.
What we do
it's
know,
like I killed less people than last time.
Oh goodness. So they said that it's typically going to take around 5 minutes for a scan at peak times, or if the package is big or complicated, they say it can take 15 minutes or more. They're not saying a lot about what kind of behavior they're going to be looking for, which is a similar comment that you made about GitHub Actions. I think it's always a challenge to, you know, be blunt. How much do you share publicly so that threat actors don't understand what you're looking for, versus so that your users realize what the security policies are? It's probably, in their opinion, safer to be vague about it. And then if you're an enterprise customer, you can probably get more information about how this is going to work. But they're saying that if a package is blocked, the publisher may receive a notification with the option to appeal. I think the choice of the word may is, it's a choice. So I interpret that to mean you might also not receive a notification. One would think that that would happen in cases where they think the publisher themselves is malicious, and then they don't tell them and they probably just kill the account. But yeah, not a whole lot of detail. And then they link to the acceptable use policies.
I want to make a correction. I'm pretty sure GitHub came out with that statement about scanning all packages April 1 of 2025. I will verify. I was looking for it in the background right now. But if that's the case, their scanning has been in place before Shai-Hulud and Axios and Chalk and Debug and all of this shizzle show that we've been dealing with in the last year. Even if it is April of this year, there's still have been a bunch of high-profile software supply chain attacks involving NPM packages that have happened. So, and I'm pretty sure it's last year. So
yeah, I mean, regardless of when it was implemented, as you and I were talking about earlier today, there is a lot of malware in NPM right now that people know is there, that has public reports on it. We're going to talk about one of those actually next. I'm sure you have more to say about the malware scanning, but
I do. What we'll do is we'll punt that until next time, whether that's next week or the week after that, after my blog post comes out, because then I can reference specific things. I don't want to hit every bullet point from the blog post now. So yeah, let's talk about this. I love this.
Okay. Next on the list is a blog that came out from Amazon yesterday. What's the date on this? Yesterday. The title of the blog is Amazon Identifies North Korean Hacker Group Behind Open Source Supply Chain Attacks. I promised a little drama here. I think, Paul, I'll let you take the lead.
Oh, I want to choose my words very, very carefully here because okay.
We have friends all over and we're not here to throw rocks. I'm just gonna say that.
I've got friends in all these companies, and I want to navigate this in a way that's respectful to their work and at the same time is honest about some of the failings in publications, research, whatever. So I think the first thing is that Amazon's main point in the recent
article,
article, thank you, geez, that came out yesterday, is that they have tied the Chalk and the Debug packages account takeover attacks from last year to DPRK, and they make it sound like they're the first ones to do this. And the reality is that Charlie at Aikido has been saying this publicly for a while. We've been all saying this. I think I've said it several times, you know, in talks and whatnot. It certainly was a known thing. It wasn't like we were hiding. We didn't have specific attribution, but the reality is that, like, when you're in the guts of DPRK malware as much as I do, like, you know, like, it just looked and smelled like, you know, a lot of the other stuff. I mean, it was unique, and not saying that it was exactly the same, but, you know, it definitely looked and felt like DPRK, and, you know, sure enough, the closer you got to, the more it looked that way as well. So, so I guess the first thing is, like, you know, Amazon taking credit for saying that this is DPRK and being the first ones to say it, which is what they explicitly say in the report. It was a bit of a stretch. So then Hacker News, Shaq the Hacker News comes out with a blog post yesterday on Hacker News, or earlier today, actually, basically just like questioning much of the Amazon.
Everything in the blog. Yeah. It's got an interesting tone to it.
It has. Now, what is interesting is that there are a couple of, Amazon does have some good detail in the report. And I noticed some chatter from the SEAL team, people, you know, talking about it as well. And there was, you know, so basically in the report was an IP address and a domain name, AWS something store or something like that. No, sorry, npmjs.store, and an IP address. Now those the IP address and that domain were already out there, known. The SEAL team pointed that out. You know, we had some of that data inside of OSM as well. But it is, you know, it's good, and to tie it to that. And they also talk about this package, Typo. What is it? Typo Core?
Typo dash crypto.
Yeah. Now here's the thing, people. And Amazon does refer to this like it's a compromised package. It's not. It's net malicious by DPRK.
Yeah, it's a typo squad.
It's a typo squad, right? It's like one of the hundreds that DPRK publishes every day, right? Like it's not unusual. Here's the thing, though, is it's still on NPM after over a year. So if you want to do some research, you want to grab a payload, and it's still, unfortunately, I just tested it right before this, I was testing it. It's still live. Now, here's the thing, is that because they've been using the ether hiding technique for months now, the payload that you get today is not the payload you would have gotten, you know, in the middle of 2025. So let's just be very clear. Like the IOCs that we've extracted today are not necessarily the IOCs that we have, but, you know, I can't go backwards in time and figure that out. So that's, you know, that is what that is. But yeah, it's just all really interesting, just watching it with the popcorn. And I think it's, you know, it's a bigger example of what's happening right now in the security ecosystem, which is that everybody wants to say how much they're doing. Everybody is announcing that they've discovered the same thing all at the same time, right? And it's kind of frustrating, especially for those of us that have been here for a while, when nobody else was here doing this, to hear everybody talking about how awesome they are and how they're discovering things that you've already discovered and had inside your platform for months. But anyhow.
Well, kind of taking it back to the announcement itself, where I think there's some value here is there's been a lot of public attention on Team PCP. And they have been, you know, synonymous with account takeovers. DPRK intentionally is not trying to catch as much attention with these attacks. I'm going to share a link to a podcast that was referred to me. It just came out recently. The latest To Catch a Thief is on North Korea. It's quite good. I was listening to the first episode last night. But their, you know, MO is to make money and to fund their economy and their weapons development. And if you think about motivators, that's not what Team PCP is doing. They don't have a country to run. They don't have missiles to develop. And being loud and splashy and bragging aligns with whatever it is their goals are. Whereas with North Korea's goals are much more economic, and, you know, to some extent, I'm sure they would like to get some intelligence, in the US economy. And so if that's your goal, then you don't want to be as obvious. You don't want to be as easy to link. And I think the reason nobody has been loudly talking, claiming linking chalk and debug to DPRK is, to your point, it smells like it. It looks like it. Can we prove it? Probably not. But do we have a really high certainty? Yes. The same thing with Axios, right?
Yeah, I think there were, I think there were some pretty hard signals. Like I think that there was shared C2 infrastructure, and I think there was evidence. It's not like this was just complete conjecture. So,
No, I wasn't suggesting it's conjecture at all. It's strong. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I wasn't suggesting that you were suggesting. I think that as a really good example of what you're talking there, Jen, about is I've gone to 2 events in the last week and a half. And at both of those events, because I have these really interactive talks, I like asking the audience questions. And I asked the audience, who's heard of contagious interview? And in the first audience, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 hands went up. And then I asked who's heard of Team PCP, and about 3 times as many hands went up, right? And I did the same thing at B-Sides Adelaide the other day. Contagious interview got maybe 5 or 6 hands. Team PCP got like 30 hands. So the reality is, to your point, we've been focusing on this squeaky wheel that really hasn't been, causing the damage that DPRK has, while we've been completely ignoring the professionals that have been over there making over $2 billion last year. And I think you and I both want us to kind of reset, the talking points here. Let's focus on who's really, especially now that Team PCP is on the run. DPRK is not on the run, right? They're pretty safe. So, sorry. Talking points, reset.
Yeah, I think that's a useful framing. Many people in the community discount or perhaps, and I shouldn't say the security research community, because much of that community is well aware of what DPRK has been doing, but the tech community doesn't necessarily associate North Korea with sophisticated cybercrime, and that's a mistake. And so as we're talking for the rest of this episode, the last topic that I have is some research I published today on DPRK activity. So a little backstory here. I was reading a blog from Socket earlier this week about the compromise of 2 packages in an ecosystem called Joyfill, which is kind of like a PDF generator. And that's nothing new. We see little compromises like this all the time. But what was new is this is a legitimate package. This is not, like that typo crypto package. This is not a typo squat. And Socket found pollen writer signatures. And so while DPRK does do account takeovers, what we have not seen is account takeovers where the pollen writer infrastructure was involved. And so I went really deep, maybe too deep. I'm still in it, looking at more of a bigger cohort of packages that we found that kind of have a similar shape. And so I looked at 2 packages that JFrog found a month or 2 ago from a small developer, and then a collection of 16 Go modules. So these are all, these 3 groups are all from different maintainers. None of them are very big. All of them had pollen writer signals. Went ahead and confirmed, yes, indeed, they are all pollen writer related. But the reason that these are account takeovers is different than what we're used to. So if we start with like a definition of what's an account takeover, what we typically think about is there's a legitimate maintainer who is explicitly targeted by a threat actor because they have access to a project or projects that are high value. So Axios, great example. Chalk Debug, great example. These are maintainers that have just an enormous blast radius if you can get into their infrastructure. So they find a way to compromise the maintainer in a way that lets them publish a malicious version, and that's the genesis of a typical account takeover. That is not what happened with these 20 packages that I investigated. These are ones where the compromise is, you might say that it's somewhat upstream from those packages. These maintainers at some point consumed the pollen writer set of malware, and pollen writer tends to target individual developers, which is a pattern I saw in these 20 packages with a couple exceptions. They're like single maintainer type situations, not affiliated with a company. And their MO is to get in quietly. Usually the malware fires on a VS Code task JSON, which is exactly what happened in these cases. And then it looks for credentials, and then it continues kind of doing its thing with those credentials. But those maintainers are not necessarily targeted. Now, they may come in through the contagious interview campaign, in which case they were targeted by somebody, but not for like a big account takeover. They were targeted to get persistence on their machines. And these account takeovers are evidence of the automation that's possible with this pollen writer malware. And that's like ATO through automation. These are almost a, oops, we didn't really mean to do that, but cool, we're glad we managed to, pop your project. Like they did mean to do it, but it wasn't the targeted ATO strategy that we tend to see.
Correct.
I'll pause there.
Yeah, no, I mean it's all great research. I think that we generated a lot of data, and sifting through that data has been a challenge. So good work there, Jen. I think the way that pollen writer is working, and I said this at least one of these conferences I was at last week. Contagious interview, the kind of classic LinkedIn recruiter style. I found one this week just on Twitter randomly and I posted about that. But that takes a lot of energy, right? You have to have a human in Pyongyang or somewhere else that's managing the stuff, creating this stuff, then interacting with humans. Sure, they're using some automation along the way, but the reality is that you have to have humans, DPRK operatives managing.
It's a social media or a social, oh my gosh, words.
Network.
Social engineering scam. You need humans to social engineer.
Yeah, it's important. And what pollen writer does is it basically just gets rid of that need for humans to be managing and orchestrating, and instead just creates automation. And you have to, watching some of these payloads pop in a sandbox where within less than a second, it's already, dropping payloads into GitHub Actions and stuff like that. It's pretty phenomenal. You gotta give them credit. And so I think people that don't, the InfoSec that doesn't really have visibility, and one of the reasons I like going and doing these kind of, InfoSec heavy, like financial services stuff and whatnot, is because InfoSec there hasn't really been, kind of exposed to software supply chain attacks, and don't realize that in a lot of cases, North Korea, they are creating more of this than everybody else combined. I don't know if that's actually true statistically, but it certainly feels like that, right? So,
I believe it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true. I wouldn't have said it if I didn't think it was true. I just don't have the data right now to back it up. I'll work on that for next time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the net here is we are going to see more. This is the continuation of a pattern where DPRK started by compromising GitHub repositories. Paul, your research that we published a week or two ago shows thousands and thousands of compromised, mostly individual developer repositories. That's kind of stage one. Stage two is the malware leaks into whatever those people own. And you and I debated, do we go as far to call this a worm? It's not really a worm, but it's got some real worm-like behavior. Like, as I say in the blog, when is an ATO not an ATO? When is a worm not a worm? It's right. A little bit of that with this this behavior. And, as I was falling down the rabbit hole and, prepping for our show today, I found yet another, a PHP package that is part of this, we'll call it leaking of the malware out of Git repositories into packages, or as you called it, jumping the fence. We're going to see more of these compromised packages that come through this way. And, they're not Typically high download packages. They tend to be pretty niche because it's individual developers getting popped. However, it's not going to stay that way. We're going to see someone somewhere bigger get hit with this.
Well, and we have seen Pollen Writer over the last 6 months. We have seen it penetrate into very, very large ecosystems. So in particular, the developer, the single developer that manages NeoVim got compromised. And so and it Pollen Writer found itself into a VS Code extension. So you're right, we're going to see this. But I think the important thing is here is it doesn't have to, for this to be successful, Pollen Writer does not have to get into OpenSearch or Light LLM. It doesn't have to do that. It just has to get into all the little packages that all these developers, and there's tens of thousands of people now that have this, right? So it doesn't have to be in these big ones. In fact, if it gets in the big ones, that's when we get a lot of visibility and people will start taking account. If it stays in these little tiny ones, in these medium, 100 stars or whatever, then nobody's really talking about it. And meanwhile, it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, which is self-replicating, which is the first
worm
test.
Without a worm, yeah,
the firm wet worm Turing test. Are you a worm or not? Is that do you self-replicate, right? And the reality is that this is absolutely self-replicating. So you and I don't want to use the word worm because we just don't want to get in this flame war with everybody else about it. But the reality is, like you said, it's a worm. We're just not calling it a worm.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting stuff. I was at an event last night where I got to talk about it. I'm looking forward to talking about it next week in DEF CON. We're going to be talking about how to threat hunt in GitHub. We've got all kinds of stuff going. I think this is a good place to wrap it up.
I agree. Thanks everybody for listening. We really appreciate it.
Have a great week. We may or may not be here next week, but we will be in Vegas for sure. Come say hi.
Show.
All right. Take care.
See you guys.